He has spent 5 tumultuous years as Canada's first parliamentary budget officer, and now he's done. Here now to tell us what he's learned and what Canadians need to know, Kevin Page. Nice to have you back in that chair.
Good to be here.
So you're unemployed now, eh?
That's correct.
You have no job.
No job.
You spent 5 years basically reading terrible things in the paper about you almost every day, and now nothing.
Unemployed.
Unemployed. A budget came out last week.
Yes.
And is it weird to see that budget come out and you really don't have anything to say officially about it?
Correct, though my office is working on that, analyzing that budget as we speak.
I'm interested in the fact that you still call it my office.
Yes, a Freudian slip. It's true.
How do you expect that they will approach, now that you're not there, how will they approach dealing with that budget?
I think they'll do it the same way they've done previous budgets. I think where it's a very experienced team. They've worked on many of them before, both supporting the executive and more recently in the Parliamentary Budget Office. So, I mean, they're going through the numbers now. We're updating our projections. We're looking at the measures, and we'll do analysis around the measures.
Do they call you and ask your advice at this point anymore?
No, we did talk about the budget Thursday night and Friday, so they're well on their way.
And you know, of course, that now that you're out of there, the government would like to definitely do a virage in how that office handles these kinds of things. Have you given them any advice on how you think they ought to handle those kinds of requests?
Well, I think from the government's perspective, I mean, when they created the Office of the Accountability, I think they wanted a true legislative budget office. We feel that we've given them that office, the government that office. And so I think the question going forward now will be, do they want more of the same or do they want something different? And if it's something different, I think that's unfortunate.
They've already said they want something different. They've already said they want you to keep your nose out of their business a lot more than you were apparently prepared to do. How do you think the staff will react to that?
Well, I think they'll be disappointed, but I mean, I think it remains to be seen. I think there's still a lot of support from the opposition, from some conservative backbenchers, and a lot of support from Canadians. So, and I think in the short term, they're going to work very hard. It'll be business as usual.
How confident are you that they will get the information they say they need to do their jobs?
Well, we've always struggled, Stephen, with the information, when we're asking for costing information on ships or fighter planes or crime bills. But we've found a way, to work through other partners to get this sort of information. So I think for the Legislative Budget Office, it's always a struggle.
Don't you have a lawsuit going right now, though, against whom?
We have a reference opinion, which is not quite a lawsuit. We're not suing anybody per se for information. A question was raised whether I was exceeding my mandate following Budget 2012. When the government said it could freeze direct program spending, and then we said we want to see the plans, and they said you're exceeding your mandate. So the question is, to the federal court, are we exceeding our mandate? I think we're within our mandate.
When do you expect to hear back on that?
It'll be a minimum of a few weeks, and perhaps more. We were in court on Thursday or Friday of last week.
And do you remain the plaintiff on that?
I remain the applicant. The applicant.
Okay.
Yeah, the respondent is actually the leader of the official opposition, Mr. Mulcair.
But is your name on this case?
That's correct.
It is, even though you don't work there anymore.
That's correct.
It's still going to be you. Okay. How much do you think the future of the work that your office is able to do hinges on a positive response on that case?
I think it's important that we clarify the mandate. As the first parliamentary budget officer, I didn't want to have an outstanding question for the next parliamentary budget officer around the scope of that mandate. And again, the question really was, do we have, is it within our mandate to analyze spending restraint? And it was certainly within our mandate to analyze stimulus, so we think it's in our mandate to analyze spending restraint. So how important it is important to have kind of clear chalk lines around the mandate. And either way, we'll just continue to operate.
Do you see the government's view, and I guess in particular Jim Flaherty's view on this at all? Do you get where he's coming from?
Well, if his view is what he said publicly recently, that we needed something more of a sounding board, and I'm not sure I totally understand that. I think we still are a sounding board. We do our own independent analysis. We make that available to all parliamentarians, to Canadians. And so in a sense, we don't have any powers within our office to hold anybody to account. That's only the role of the elected representatives. So, but we provide these independent data points with analysis.
Let me read something that Philip Cross, whom you know, I guess, formerly of StatsCan, he wrote this in the Financial Post at the beginning of the year. He says the problem with Kevin Page and the PBO was that to burnish their reputation for independence at their fledgling agency, they fell into the trap of reflexively taking the opposite side from the government on every issue. This is not demonstrating independence. This is a slavish devotion to an opposing position. Being independent means evaluating every situation on its merits, not the automatic gainsaying of any position the government takes, to paraphrase John Cleese. The confrontational style and quick resort to court action reduce the credibility the PBO could have banked from being right about some important things, like the cost overrun for the F-35 jets. Well, first, opening reaction to that, and then I'll ask a follow-up.
Well, Philip's a friend, and it's good that
Still?
Yes, still, absolutely. We've talked subsequently to that article in the Financial Post, and he will always remain a friend. So I think it's good to have this sort of dissonance about, are we fulfilling our mandate? How are we fulfilling that mandate? Our own point, Stephen, with respect to our analysis, when you look at some of the numbers, our projections overall for the deficit over the next 5 years, we both come to balance. There's not a lot of difference. We talked about cost estimates around F-35. At the beginning, there was a big difference. After the AG's report, after a report by KPMG, not such a big difference. And I think we'll have the same experience on ships. So when you get to the bottom line numbers, I think probably not a lot of difference. Where we are different is I think we provide big papers and they're peer reviewed. So on fighter planes, on crime bills, on ship costing, we have methodologies, we have assumptions, we have ranges, and we have people, independent experts, peer reviewing a paper. And you don't often get that from the government. So yeah, but still, I'm glad Philip speaks out.
How much satisfaction have you taken from the fact that your numbers have turned out to be more accurate than Mr. Flaherty's numbers on numerous occasions?
Well, nobody can see the future. So, economists are not clairvoyants, are medium. So, so we provide these rich planning frameworks with as much analysis as we can around it. And like baseball, I think if you get on base 3 out of 10 times, you're doing fine. Though I think like a year ago, we took a lot of flack in the House Finance Committee for being pessimistic about the economy in 2012 and 13, and we talked about the factors, including austerity at the federal level, but other factors, including debt at the consumer level, the need to have a moderating housing market. I think for the most part, that the private sector forecasters, they came back to where PBO is right now, unfortunately.
Do you think you had a confrontational style?
I think we weren't afraid of confrontation when we were putting out analysis. At the same time, as I've said in the past, we know we need to build bridges, if we're going to get better exchanges of information. How
much of this sort of comes with the job? You're on one side of things, they're sometimes on the other side. A lot, a lot. And I think if the government, or if the Conservative Party was in opposition right now, I think they'd be quite supportive of our office. But our job is not to support the executive per se. Our job is to support Parliament. And the role of Parliament, certainly the opposition and those parliamentarians that are not part of the executive, is to hold the government to account. And so we're actually operating on the other side of the red line, which is fine. Did it ever get personal for you? No, never. Do you think it did for Mr. Flaherty? It might have, but again, you'd have to ask him that, but it's certainly not personal for me. I have nothing but great respect for Minister Flaherty. Why? Why not? I mean, somebody that gives up so much of his life to become finance minister in a very difficult time, I think, and that's true for other parliamentarians as well. Okay, but, he did, I'm not going to say he slandered you, but he certainly seemed to take great delight in trying to put you in your place with some occasional negative comments about you. Did that not bother you? No. No, because again, for what's important for us is the quality of the analysis, and will that analysis stand the test of time? So if we put out analysis and we get a political reaction that may seem personal to some people, but we don't see analysis, we don't tend to get bothered. This wasn't necessarily supposed to be a high-profile job that you originally took 5 years ago, but it has turned out to be that way. Is that a help to you? Well, I think one of the reasons, Stephen, it became high profile is that first of all, we decided that we wanted to be front and center on the major issues of the day, whether they were costing a war or it was economic and fiscal projections as we move into recession and deficit, or costing fighter planes or ships. So I think in the sense that because we provided effectively a data point with analysis, the government provided a data point but no analysis, I think that raised our profile. Did you mind that? Well, I think it comes with the territory. I would not want to be the parliamentary budget officer, through this period of time when we go into recession and deficit. We have major
systemic problems with respect to transparency in front of Parliament. Again, we have government entering fiscal restraint with no spending plans for the next 5 years. I don't want to be looking back 5 years from now and people saying, well, where were you? So it was more important for us to stand up and to be there.
And what if the next person who has your former job decides to go a different way and tries to sort of get along a little more? How will you regard that?
Well, I mean, I don't think, I think the most important thing is the quality of the work. And if the work is high quality, and if the next parliamentary budget officer can find a way to mend fences and still maintain the high quality work, that's fine.
What would you say was the PBO's finest moment to date?
I think I don't think there is one moment. I think it is the body of work and the fact that we operated transparently, and when there was a lot of criticism for that kind of approach, and we just hung on. So all that work is up on our website, and all the costings are peer reviewed by experts. And when people ask questions about there, we were there to answer the questions. So we feel that's a very proud moment for us. But it's not one moment per se. It's 5 years of moments.
Knowing what you know about the job today that you no doubt didn't know 5 years ago, would you have still wanted it?
I didn't want it 5 years ago. Nobody wanted to be parliamentary budget officer. We had to get our arms and wrists twisted. But having taken the job, having an opportunity to work with 15 absolutely incredible public servants, and just the body work that we're able to do, yes, I would do it over again.
But seeing what it's in a bit of a political cauldron right now, this job. Who's going to want it?
Well, there are at least 3 people, Stephen, in my office that would gladly take the job, even knowing, like it is for me, I'm unemployed today, knowing that perhaps 5 years down the road they will potentially be unemployed. But I think they would take it because they see the higher purpose, the real true public service, pushing up against a lot of secrecy and promoting fiscal transparency for Parliament and Canadians. There's at least 3 amazing people in my office that would take it.
Would they want the job knowing that it's possible that they won't be able to operate with the same kind of, as you would perceive it, free rein that they would like to have?
Well, the mandate, the rein comes from the Act of Parliament, which is, it's a legislated mandate. There are lots of reins.
There's disagreement on interpretation of that.
There's a disagreement on interpretation. As you said, we're in the federal court now to sort that out. Yes, they would still take the job, and they would fight for the independence of the office the same way governors of the central banks or auditor generals fight for their independence.
There's a website called leadnow.ca. Did you see this thing that popped up on their website? Take a look over my shoulder at the monitor. We're going to put this up. Save Kevin Page, our federal budget watchdog. And this has got thousands of signatures on it online. And I guess the question is, are there any circumstances under which you'd consider being reappointed?
No, I said years ago that one mandate would be enough for me. And I said that in the context of that because the legislation was weak, I needed to speak out and to highlight to parliamentarians that we need to fix the legislation. I'm appointed by the Prime Minister, and again, people consider me a watchdog for the finances that are managed by the Prime Minister. That doesn't make a lot of sense. There's no role for Parliament. Our office is located within the Library of Parliament. I have a direct legislative mandate to parliamentarians, but administratively I report to the librarian. There's all kinds of ways in which this independence is threatened. So years ago I started speaking out, we need to fix the legislation. I think some of the problems and the uncertainties we have with the office right now go to the fact that we have weak legislation. We haven't protected the office.
If the effect, though, of all of your work was to have Parliament reconsider the legislation but defang, that's probably the wrong word to use, take a lot of the teeth out of what you now perceive as your independent modus vivendi, that'd be a pretty negative thing, wouldn't it?
It would be, but I think again, I don't know how to use the metaphor teeth, but I think the teeth is really to a large degree driven by context, driven by the fact that we have all this uncertainty, we needed to be present, and we need to have analysis on fiscal analysis or on long-term issues, on cyclical structural issues, or on these major costings. So we needed to show up. I think in a world where we had much more transparency made available to parliamentarians on spending plans or on work done by public servants and costing, I don't think you would see the teeth. I think the dogs would be barking in the backyard, we'd be sorting it out, and our parliamentarians, our political leaders would be debating the big priorities and the policy directions in the front yard.
Anything you didn't get done that you wish you had?
Well, I wish we were able to fix the legislation, and so that the hand of the next parliamentary budget officer would be, a much better foundation for the office. There's all types of work I think that we need to look at that'll, I think future parliamentary budget officers will get to work on dealing with tax reform, dealing with environmental issues, inequality, et cetera. So we didn't, our body work was significant, but we focused on the big issues of the day in front of Parliament.
Whenever Jim Flaherty took a shot at you in the past, you always had the job. So I'm assuming you felt somewhat constrained about going toe-to-toe with him. You don't have the job anymore. You can say whatever you want about Jim Flaherty today. Would you care to respond to any of the things that he's said about you over the years?
No, no.
You'd make our lives a lot more interesting if you would.
Yes, I'm a public servant, and
not anymore.
Yeah, I still feel like I'm a public servant, and I had a great opportunity. And again, I don't think we ducked, and we can take a punch at the parliamentary budget office.
What does it say, just finally, about Canada, where, you'll forgive this characterization, a bald, kind of nerdy-looking guy with glasses is seen as a bit of a folk hero among Canadians because you had your eyes on the purse? What does that say about the country?
Well, I'm certainly not a folk hero. I get paid money to do this job. We did the job, so I don't, nobody in my office thinks any one of us are heroes. We just had a job to do.
Well, your job here isn't done yet, because we're going to have a little discussion about how Parliament keeps an eye on the spending going forward. So thank you for getting it started tonight.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.